Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Someone sent me this article a few days ago, and he was essentially asking me a question about whether or not going to college is even worth it anymore for becoming a software engineer, at least in the United States and probably Europe too. Apparently, more and more companies are no longer requiring degrees to get hired, mostly as a software engineer. I mean, number one on this list is Google. And you just going down this list, you also have Ernst & Young, I guess a book publishing company, Penguin, Random House, Costco. So it's a good sample of industries across the range. So it's not just software industries. We have Whole Foods here, the Hilton hotel chain, Apple, obviously, Starbucks. So all these companies are publicly saying we no longer require a college degree if you want to be considered as an entry level candidate for working as a software engineer. I think all of these have software included in them. So yeah, things are changing. As I record this video, it is 2020, August 2020. Right now, a lot of colleges aren't even open because of the virus. And so this particular person who wrote me said that he would be entering college this year, but he's thinking about deferring for the entire year because his college isn't open in person. And he's wondering whether or not he can use that extra year to try and break into the software field without college at all. So yeah, let's get into it. So I think the answer is yes. Unequivocally, yes. You can break into software without having a college degree or any college experience whatsoever. Software is kind of like professional sports in the sense that you're drafted on potential and kind of what you've done up until that point. So especially in sports like hockey and baseball, they draft a lot of high school kids right out of high school. So these 17, 18-year-old kids making millions of dollars right away going into professional sports because the teams that draft them feel that these players possess a lot of upside potential, such that in 10 years down the road, 5-10 years down the road, they could be performing at a high level. But then there are a lot of those same kids, not the same kids, a lot of other kids end up going to college and then playing their sport in college and then getting drafted out of college. So both paths are perfectly viable, and there's no reason why you couldn't succeed in one or the other. I guess it all boils down to potential then, or how much of a head start you've gotten. So let's say you started programming at the age of 10. For whatever reason, you just like to tinker with computers, and by the time you were in 8th grade, you're writing software and you're publishing software. Maybe you have an app in the App Store, or a couple apps, and people are using them, and you're writing software. You're putting stuff out there. You have a GitHub. You're answering questions on Stack Overflow. You're doing all the things that software engineers do, with the exception of working for a living and getting paid to do it. If that's you, or if that was you, then I would seriously consider exploring your options outside of college. If that does not describe you, let's say you're a little bit of a late bloomer, you're a senior in high school, and you want to study CS because you're excited by the possibilities, and obviously you want to make a good living. College is probably a good choice. So it boils down to kind of where you are in your path at that point in time. If you're a high school student, if you're 17, 18 years old, and you're making these decisions now, I would look at it that way. Obviously, finances plays a large role, so I would be remiss to ignore that. If you're taking out a lot of loans for college, and you're going to a school that's not highly regarded, like a tier 3 school or a tier 4 school, maybe a school that no one's really heard of except people in your geographic region, but you're able to sort of teach yourself, kind of figure stuff out on your own, publish an app or put up a website, whatever. I would give that serious consideration. College today has gotten enormously expensive, ridiculously expensive in my opinion, at least for what you get back in return. And I think in the tech industry, a lot of people a lot of companies are coming around to the realization that having a college degree does not necessarily mean you are an adequate software developer or even a competent one. There are a lot of kids that are coming out of college who just can't program. Just can't program. Simple as that. And even the ones who can, who are good, they weren't taught the professional skills in programming. So they don't know things like version control. They don't know how to run, how to handle a Scrum meeting, or not how to handle one, but how to just behave in a Scrum meeting. How to handle merge conflicts. How to deal with PRs, and when a PR gets pushed back, don't get offended, or don't get all emotional about it. Just fix it, move on, things like that. These are things that they don't teach you in college, because most of the college curriculums don't focus on the professional skill sets, how to use Jira, things like that, or any project management software. How to deal with PMs. What is a PM? How to deal with project managers and things like that. These are important skills that you just learn on the job. And they don't teach that in college. So if you're going to a sort of a second, third, fourth tier school that has not very high brand recognition, then I would seriously consider whether or not it's worth it, because it's going to cost you time and money. And time is equally considerable as the money. 4 years is a long time, and that's a lot of time you could be doing something else, like learning how to write software. So if you're considering things like MIT or Carnegie Mellon or Stanford, and you can afford it, you should go. There are many benefits to going to one of those places beyond just the education. In fact, I would consider the education one of the secondary benefits. The primary benefit is just the networking. But if that does not describe you, then it's a serious consideration. That's number one. Number two, let's say you're not a high school kid. Let's say you're late 20s, 30s, even 40s, and you're considering a career switch because you hate your job, or maybe you were downsized, maybe you were laid off, and you've been thinking about the software thing for a long time now, and you see all your software buddies making a lot of money, and job security is not a problem, etc. Whatever. So you're considering software as a mid-career professional, and you're wondering whether or not going back and getting a degree is worth it, or going to a boot camp, or just do it on your own. This is a bit of a thornier issue, because it's not as cut and dry, right? Like it's not like the next logical step for you would have been college. So the way this is essentially what I did. When I graduated college, first 2 years out of college, I was a high school math teacher. Excuse me. I taught calculus and AP statistics, and I was just teaching math, and I didn't like it. It was miserable, and so I taught myself software engineering. I'm self-taught. Now, this is going back to a time when boot camps didn't really exist. This is around 2010. So I just said, all right, well, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life or even another 3 months, so I'm going to teach myself software development. And I just bought 1 million books, and I just studied until my eyes bled. And then after a couple of years, I started working as a software engineer professionally. It took me about 2 years, about 1.5 years to 2 years. It was not easy. That's putting it lightly. It was conceivably the most difficult thing I've ever done. And so the question there is, can you sort of put yourself through that? Are you willing to grind your way through that experience, making mistakes? So a lot of people think when you're doing self-study, like, it's a linear progression. Every day, week, or month, you get a little bit better. It's like you get better. And then one day you sort of graduate and you become a software engineer. That is not how it happened. For me, it was like I learned this one thing for 2 months, 6 weeks, whatever, and it just wasn't clicking. And I was like, screw this. Let me try this instead. So, an example of that would have been like the Unity 3D gaming engine. I tried to teach myself that, and I spent a lot of money on the software, like the IDEs and everything, and all these books and videos. And I was just like, I can't do this. This is just totally beyond me. And it was, because I was not ready for it. I spent about 3 months on that, and then I moved on to something else. I tried to teach myself what's called OpenGL. Again, just not ready, just grossly overestimating myself. And just trying to learn this low-level sort of graphics engine without even understanding what certain basic languages are. And then that took another couple weeks. This is all just lost time. So it's kind of like a winding road. You get a little bit better, go back, get a little better, go back. And that went on for 2 years. And then finally, I kind of got myself to like a minimal point where I was able to work competently. Well, it wasn't even that much. I was able to demonstrate some minimal skill as a software developer, and someone, God willing, was willing to pay me. And that's how it happened. And then I moved to New York City, and then I started looking for work, and it just went from there. So that's the self-guided route. That was 10 years ago. It was 2010. So today, it's a little bit easier today because there's so much more material. So maybe that's harder. I mean, depending on just your perspective and knowing what to study. But the material wasn't quite as readily available in 2010 as it is today. So it's easier to find content. There was no Stack Overflow in 2010. That was like, had all the answers basically. So anyway, so is that a viable career? I mean, obviously it is, because I'm doing it, I'm living proof, and there's many other people who are doing it too. The question is, I think the key question people have is, will that hinder your experience when looking for that first job? When companies are like, oh, you don't have any educational background, or you didn't even go to a boot camp, we don't know if you're qualified for this, which is perfectly valid, by the way. And so what you need to do in that situation is show as much as you can that you are able to do the work. And you have to demonstrate. So going back to my sports analogy, when kids are recruited out of high school, and I have some experience with this, having tutored a lot of kids in college. I tutored a lot of kids, and the reason I tutored them was because they had to have certain cutoffs to get into their college, because of they were being recruited as athletes, but they couldn't get in without hitting a certain numerical score on their SAT or their ACT. That's another topic, but the point is, these kids had like these recruiting videos, and these professionally made videos where it's showing them how they played in various games, or in track meets or swimming meets or whatever, or lacrosse, and they would just whoever's watching the video would just see what the athlete could do, and that's it. And that's essentially what you need to do in your software work, right? So you need to show what you can do, right? Obviously, that's going to be in the form of like an app or a portfolio website. Those are the most obvious forms, but there are other ways you can do it, like having like a pretty active blog, tweeting a lot, maybe where you're tweeting like code samples, or maybe even having a pretty active like Stack Overflow. Really, actually finished projects that are deployed is the best way. But you want to demonstrate as visually as you can that you are capable of doing what they need you to do. I have a whole nother video on kind of like how you can showcase your work, but as a self-taught developer, the onus is much more on you to do that, because the colleges the degree acts as a proxy for your work ethic and your intelligence, quite frankly. And so if you have a degree from a top school like an MIT or Stanford or whatever, immediately the other person on the other end of that is thinking like, all right, well, he can at least get through a good school. He at least got into a good school, and he or she can get through it. That alone says a lot. So they have the commitment to follow through to graduation. So that alone says you're able to finish what you started, right? So a lot of people can't finish what they start. So as a self-taught developer, you have to show that you can finish what you start in the form of projects. The more, the better. So the onus is on you to do that. So far we've discussed college and the self-taught route. The last one is Bootcamp. The thing about boot camps is that as time goes on, it seems like the reputation is getting worse and worse. So the coding boot camps, and if you're not familiar with the coding boot camp, it's like a condensed CS education minus all the theory. So it's like they teach you all the stuff that's like immediately applicable in the professional job market. And to that end, they do that. So, they'll teach you GitHub, they'll teach you version control, they'll teach you how to handle what's a Scrum meeting and stuff like that. And the right languages too. So you're not going to learn some outdated language. You're going to learn the most modern ones, like obviously JavaScript and Python, things like that. I I think the problem with boot camps is that there was just an oversaturation in the market with just the number of options of boot camps all over the country. And so as boot camps, as more and more boot camps popped up, more and more people went to boot camps. And frankly, a lot of them shouldn't have gone. A lot of them weren't qualified and just shouldn't have become software developers. Period. They just weren't. They just didn't have the ability. So a lot of boot camps were like cranking out these sort of unqualified devs who were never going to make it in the industry. So it's not like they just needed more training. They just weren't going to make it. Period. And so that's been happening more and more. And as that's been going on, the entire industry has been taking a hit as a result of it. And I don't see that trend changing anytime soon. The boot camps have kind of a negative reputation for that reason. So let me put it this way. I would never hire a boot camp graduate if I was hiring the graduate as their first job. So if I get a resume from XYZ boot camp and it says like, this is like, I just finished my boot camp last week and now I'm looking for a job, I just on to the next resume. Now, if somebody went to a boot camp and then has 2 years of experience at a certain company and then that resume crosses my desk, we'll consider it, obviously. So as far as the entry level goes, the boot camps are becoming more and more the reputation is, I should say, less and less. Is becoming less and less strong. There are certain boot camps that come to mind that have retained a strong reputation. The first one that comes to mind is Full Stack Academy, in mostly out of New York City. It seems like App Academy is still doing okay, although I haven't really checked in a while. I do know they're still teaching Ruby on Rails, which is really outdated. I'm not really sure what to make of Flatiron School anymore. It's kind of hit or miss with them. And so the first two I mentioned seem to still be going pretty strong. Every other boot camp that I can think of is really they're just looking for your tuition money, and whatever happens after that happens after that. That's it. So that's the way I would look at it. It's not so much that the boot camps are a ripoff, it's that there are just too many people who aren't qualified, and they're going to boot camps, and then as they enter the industry, as they sort of saturate the entry-level market, that reflects back on the boot camp. And then by proxy, it reflects back onto you if you also go to that boot camp. All right, so there are certain boot camps who just flat out would never hire from, period. No matter, I don't care who went to that. I don't care. I'm just not going to hire. And so it's unfortunate for anyone else who does go to those boot camps. If I were starting over, I would essentially do what I did anyway, which is teach myself, but I think I would do it faster. I think I'd be better at it now because there's so many more options. There are so many more resources. It's just easier to teach yourself today in 2020 than it is in 2010. I think it's getting to a point where like that's going to be considered the best way, like even better than college, unless you're going to the best colleges. It's kind of like getting an MBA. I consider my MBA going back to school for my MBA for a while. This is right around when I was like, this is about 10 years ago, and I was like, I really hate my job. What do I want to do for the remaining 50, 60 years of my life, right? So I had to kind of figure that out. It was like law school or business school, or what about this software thing? So I was looking at a lot of business schools, and sort of the unspoken rule there, the unspoken understanding in business schools, if it's not a top 20 school, don't even bother. Nobody cares if you went to some podunk MBA business school that no one's ever heard of. It might help you on a regional basis, but on a national level, if you're trying to get into like the finance industry, it's not going to help. You're just wasting time. So I think I'm starting to see software more and more like that. Where, if I get a resume from, some podunk school or some, regionally based school versus like a self-taught person, I'm not going to look at one as better than the other. They're both on equal footing to me. And then for me, I'm just going to evaluate them the same. Just who has the better projects, the better skill set, whose skill set matches better, etc. And if you go to a boot camp and like that's all you've done, that's probably going to hurt you in my perspective. That's going to be a knock on your on your resume, unless it's like Full Stack Academy or one of those places. So that's the way I see it now. Hopefully that answers your question. If I were this individual who sent me this email, if you're watching this video, I recommend you give it a shot for a year. If you already know you're deferring for a year, then yeah, definitely continue your self-study and start applying for internships right now and see if you even get interviews, if people even respond to you. And if you get that first job, maybe college, just forget college. You start making money right away. Unless you really, really want to go to college and experience college and spend $250,000 doing that for the next 4 years. So that's it. That's my take on it. If you're in the same situation, ask around. I'm not the only authority. I'm not an authority on this. This is just my opinion. The only thing I'll say for certain is that if I see a certain college on a resume, if I see a resume with college on it, it won't sway my opinion one way or the other. It just won't, unless that college is MIT or Caltech, one of those crazy high, just ridiculously smart people schools. So if not, then it's just another kid who went to college. That's that. So, okay, hopefully that helps out. Let me know if you have any questions or if you agree or disagree, put it in the comments, whatever. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.